Alright, right here you see that we're going to be painting Gloomhaven, and as you can see we're looking at the Brute here, the Inox Brute, and I'm going to be painting him up as best as I can. He's got a lot of shell to him, and here's the Orchid Spellweaver. She's got a purple shade with that dark red, and you could see, you know, these pictures aren't the greatest, so you got to use a little bit of your imagination. So the first thing that I want to do is get onto that Brute, because I'm going to take some Morphang Brown and try to do all the fur aspects of him, and that's probably going to be the easiest thing to do. So what I'd like to do is get a little bit on my brush there, and as you can see I already got one coat on there to go over the black primer, but I'm working in some more, and I'm just making sure that it's in there real good. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a Rygar flesh, and what I do, as you can see here, is his whole body is a different color. It's not a flesh color, so I'm using a Rygar flesh because I'm going to use a wash over that. That's really going to help bring out what we're attempting to do, and it's going to look like garbage for a while, but it all kinds of come together in the end, and that's a lot of things that you're going to discover when you're painting. So I want to be careful because I don't want to get on that brown, but if I do, I can always fix it. It's not the end of the world. And as you can see, I just want to make sure it's in there really good over that black primer, and just really working around, making sure that I don't get that fur coat that he has working on him. That's the last thing that we want to do. We want to make sure that we kind of work that in really well and everything comes together. And you can see I'm just getting his hands now and working that in real fine, and everything will just come as we need it, which is just absolutely perfect. There we go, and as you can see, just worked out pretty well. Now we're going to let that dry, and we're going to move over to the Spellweaver, because this is where we really want to be. We want to get her up and going while we're waiting for the Brute to dry. And I always try to paint in different times to keep moving, constantly keep moving. Now, as you can see, I was using a Genestealer purple there, and what I'm doing is just getting all the flesh. I'm not worried about getting anything else on there, and just really working it into her arms, as you can see there, and just having it get in there as best as I can. The whole point is just to get all her flesh, and that's going to darken up a lot because we're going to put a wash over it, but we're going to want to come back over it, and you're going to see how we're going to take the process and just work it all in properly. And it's looking pretty good from there. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to take some corn red. I didn't show you the bottle, unfortunately, but we're taking the corn red and we're just doing her dress. And we're trying to be careful because we don't want to get it onto that purple. The first layer you want to put over where you think is going to be the hardest layer to get with your brush later. And this corn red for her dress is pretty easy to go over. And I made sure I went over with the purple a little bit, and that way I can blend it all in so we don't have any problems. As you see, the back is just so easy to get in there. And I'm using a smaller brush to make sure I don't hit any of those purple areas, or that Genestealer purple. We want to make sure that we are just very consistent, and we're doing everything that we need to keep the flow going there, which is just exactly what we need to do. And you can see that I'm getting the little lines, and I'm using the side of the brush there too. Now, it doesn't look like much again because we have to work in that spell casting, that kind of ice thing that she's got working on her. And we'll look at the card again. But I'm really just taking my time, making sure, because she has some strands that come down, and we want to make sure that we get all that in there as much as we can. And there you go. We're just getting the back of her collar, which is a very tough area. But if you notice, I wasn't too worried about doing her head first. her ice hair, because I knew that I was going to have to get that collar and it was going to come back over. It's easier to take and paint over and come down than it is to go up and possibly get it in her hair. And you can see I'm just touching up, make sure I got all the spots, and it looks like we got her pretty well covered there, and she's looking pretty good. The next thing I'm going to take is the Ushabti bone, and we're going to go back to the brute now. And we want to get his horns, and he has this chest plate on him that looks like it's all bone. So we want to make sure that we get that, and we work that out pretty well. And as you can see that I've got that, and then his shoulder pads were a bone, which it didn't look like it was anything more than bone, and that in the top of his horns and his two wristbands. They were very bone-like, and if you look at the picture, you're trying to figure out what's the best way to make that all work together. So right now I just went with a Ushabti bone, which worked out pretty well. Next thing I'm doing is I'm going back to the spellcaster, and I'm taking some Hoth Blue, which is a Citadel line. And what we're going to do now is we're going to work on that spellcast, that energy that she has on the bottom, and also her two spell bolts that look like they're ice. So we went with the light blue and we worked it that way. One of them looked like she had flames in it according to the picture, but I just liked it better just having her casting the two like ice bolts. And that's where you kind of use your imagination and you work yourself into it. Now I'm just taking my time with a smaller brush and just getting that color in there. I know it's going to darken up, but we're going to shade that. We're going to build out on it. So we're using this Hoth Blue as the base color underneath. So that's making it a lot easier. And you can see that we're just getting in there perfectly and just making sure that we're not running over. And now we're working on the bottom part there, which is working out just fine. And we're going to get a little more paint on our brush, because we want to make sure that we have this flow up from the ground so it hits some of her boots, but we don't want to overcome her boots too much. And you can see that there we go. We just start working that in there, just taking our time with our brush. If you see, we're using and doing the thicker area first, we're making sure that we get that, and we're just working in there just fine without any issue. Now once it's all done around there, we're going to put that down and we're going to let that dry. Maybe we'll get a little bit more paint there. I think I missed a few spots, as you can see, and I go almost completely off camera with it. But you could tell the professionalism here is just overwhelming. But the most important thing is that we get the coverage, and that's what we're doing. You see how I'm working down, and I'm just scraping down from her boots. I'm not going up because then it wouldn't look right. I want to come down, and you can see that I'm just kind of getting a little bit on her boots, but I'm just being very careful how I spread this paint, how I work this paint in there. And that's like key right there, is just making sure that we have enough there, touching up her areas. And now I'm going to work into that hair, and that's where you got to be careful, because you have the purple around her face, and don't forget we have the corn red around her collar. So we don't want to spend the entire afternoon touching everything up because we make mistakes. You start at the top and you kind of work your way down nice and easy with good flow, good control of our brush. If you can see, I'm lower on the brush here, so I have a good control. I have my elbows on the table, so I have a good steady hand. And believe me, at my age, you don't really have a lot of steadiness in your hands. And you can see that that's just going on there. And right now, she kind of looks like a mess, but we're going to make her come together here. And you're going to see how this all works together. And we just got everything where we want to do, because Janice wants to be the spellcaster when we play the game, and I wanted to make sure that we had the two figures painted so when we do our live playthrough that they look pretty good. And you can see that we got that color in there pretty good. I'm just touching everything up a little bit, just hitting some areas there and making sure everything comes out perfectly the way we want it to. Now we're going to move on to our next part here. which basically is we're going to go back to the brute here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our lead belcher and we're just going to hit his sword and his shield there. Now, as you can see in the picture, you can't really see the shield, but here's again where I went with my imagination. I said, well, you know, if he's going to gain all these powers and everything, he's got to have a metal shield and he's got to have a metal thing. The next thing I take is one of my favorite golds. It's a retribution armor. And I'm just going to go around the outside of that shield. I really want to give that shield a little definition. As you can see, we have gold on the outside and silver on the inside. And we're just taking our time. Now, if you're watching this, I'm working my way around nice and slow. Just taking my time so everything fits in there together real nicely, and that's the most important thing that we want to do here. We want to make sure that we get that in there just right, and we're working that pretty good, and everything seems to be coming out just exactly how we want it to. Just nice and easy, nice small brush, taking your time, not rushing around where you're going to have to touch up the lead belcher, and then the lead belcher is going to lead into the retribution armor. You just want to take your time and try to get it done once. Listen, mistakes are going to happen, and these things happen. But you can see where I worked on the shield, the belt buckle, which was an important spot for it, and we just gave him a little bit more definition by adding in some metallics to him, because he was kind of bland there. And right now it doesn't look like much, but once we start putting our washes and some of our shading in a little bit, it'll all come together very, very nicely. And you can see, again, just being very, very careful in what we do, really working the color in, making the color work for us. And you can see that that shield's starting to come together really nice. Once we get that we get that shade on there, it's going to make a great difference in it, and that's what we're trying to attempt here. So as you can see, it looks pretty good. Looks like, you know, we've got all our prime colors on there, and that's what we're looking to do, is get our prime, our layer colors on, and just get them in there and really work from there. From here, I'm going to take some Durtucci Violet wash, and I'm going to just really work it in there, but I don't want to hit those blue areas. If you see there, I don't want to hit that Hoth blue. If I get it on there, it's not the end of the world, because we're going to build out from it. But right now, I'm just trying to get that corn red, really work it in to her face and to her head. I'm not even worried about her hair, excuse me, but as much as I'm trying to do is get the purple flesh and the back of her dress, because it's almost like a reddish kind of purple thing that she's got going on. At least that's the way I see it in my mind. So I'm kind of working that in, because I know I'm going to have to build out with that. So I want to make sure that I get some of this wash into the recesses. It's kind of important to really work it in there and get it so it's just doing exactly what we need it to do. And that's really control the model there. And you can see I'm just taking my brush and I'm moving what I have on the brush around, making sure that I get it into the recesses the way I want it. I want to make sure that that wash sits there the way I want it to do. And don't be afraid to take a little bit more on your brush and use it to kind of sculpt, because what you're doing is you're moving that wash and you're pushing it into the recesses, okay? And you're painting over it, but you're controlling that wash by moving it around and getting it. And once you feel that you have a look that you want, that's when you know you got it, and then you can pretty much put it down to dry. And you can see that I'm just moving around. I'm not happy with where it is, and especially in the face area where I really wanted to get into certain recesses of her face to give her face and her cheekbones and her face some structure. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some Serpium Septum, and I'm going to use it to cover our beast, because that's where we want to go next. We're letting her dry with her wash, and we're going to let it all settle in. But now we're going to work this wash right in there, and you can see what I'm doing right here. I'm going over everything. I'm going over all the metallic, especially since that wash works very well with the gold. So I'm not afraid to use it in there, and I'm taking and getting it all over the Ushabti bone. As you can see, really working it in there. And you can see where it's kind of taken over a bit, and that's exactly what we want. We want that wash to really get in there. I'm going in the back of of his cloak, which is his fur cloak, and I'm getting it in there because it's darkening everything up. Now look how I'm taking it and I'm putting that all over the silver, or the lead belcher, all over his boots, really working that in there into the top of his face. And here's where I'm talking about. See how that's working in on his chest and that bone area that we painted? It's really kind of sitting there and doing its job. Exactly what we're looking to do. Perfect. And we're going to move it around a little bit more, but right now we're just going to put it down and let it dry. We're pretty happy with where it is. Next thing we want to do is we want to go back to the Genestealer Purple. But I take some of that Genestealer Purple and I'm going to cut it with some white scar. So I get a little bit of that lighter color. Because what I want to do is, now that I darkened up her skin, I want to lighten her skin. So I want to take some of it off my brush, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pick up the figure here, and I'm just going to very lightly start working over the top of that wash and that Genestealer Purple. I'm actually going to go a little lighter because her skin is lighter, but I do want that dark underneath because it's actually going to help on how things stand out. And you're going to watch how we're just going to very lightly, because we take it off and we're going to work it into her face a little bit. And this is where that wash, how I manipulated that wash into her face, okay, and then come back over and really start to work out where it all starts to come together a little bit. Exactly what we're trying to attempt here. We're working her midriff a little bit. I'm not too worried because I don't have that much on my brush right now. So if I get a little bit on her clothing, it kind of works. It kind of, because I'm hitting the high point there, which is just perfect. And it all starts to come together a bit. And that's exactly what we're looking to do. And it's working out very, very nicely. And right where we want it to be. I mean, you can't ask for much more. So there we go. We're just now, because I have so little on my brush, I'm really just working it in there really well. And you can see where her skin is lightening up. Exactly what we want. We want to lighten up that skin real nice. And I'm just taking what's left on the brush and just hitting a little bit of the high points, because I don't want that as dark as it seems it's going to be. And just working it in there. And so far so good. Exactly kind of where we want to get things. But we're far from done. We're far from done with her. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to take that Hoth blue, but I cut it with some white again. So again, I just took a little bit and I'm just going over everything because of what I was afraid that I may have lost with that wash. So you can see I'm just nice and lightly just hitting the high points. I'm leaving the darker points underneath because that's going to give it some definition, as you can see, and just hitting over the top. And I'm going to go hit the back side of it. There we go. Now I'm working her hair a little bit because we want to start bringing that out. We want to start lightening it up and give that ice effect. So what we're doing is, again, just shade after shade, just taking and working and working and working that in as best as we can, and everything will come out perfectly. There we go. Exactly what we're looking to do. Just working it nice and slow And we're going to let that dry for a little bit. Perfect. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the white scar and we're going to cut it even more. And if you see, I have it right over there where I'm just kind of going over it again so we get that power. And I'm trying to hit just very lightly over her boots and some of that, and just let it go a bit. Just letting it work its way in perfectly. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. Just get it so it just sits there absolutely perfectly and right where we need it to be. And we're just taking now the light blue that I added the white to, and just going over and put another layer on. You see what that's doing, and I'm just doing it very, very lightly. See, I'm wiping off some of it and just making sure I hit the high points, because we want to have that dark blue sit underneath and really absorb what we're trying to do here. And I'm putting a little over on her chest plate because she in the picture she has like this ice plate, it looks like. So that's working pretty well for us. So we're getting that to work in there. And I'm just working on her back plate that she has, and just kind of working over the top. Now as you can see, it's layering out, so it's giving that ice effect, or that very white powder if you look at the card that they have. And with her light skin, it's kind of blending all together a bit. So we're getting pretty close here. So the next thing we want to do is just take the scar white itself and go directly on over some of that very, very light Hoth blue with the white on there. Just hitting the high points. Now look what I'm doing. I'm not hitting it very hard. I'm just nice and lightly, especially in her hair, because she really lightens up in her hair. And just hitting that breastplate that she has of ice, and hitting the top of her hair, not getting it on the purple, just working that brush, because I have very little on there, and I just want the high points. I just want it to kind of float on top, kind of how if you ever done water, how that works. And we've done plenty of videos on water. You just go lighter and lighter, but you also go in lighter with your brush. You're working outwards. And as you can see, she doesn't look half bad there. It's pretty close to what we want. It's not over the top. It's just a simple way to do this figure. Nice, easy, simple, and I'm just touching up a little area there. But I'm pretty happy with what we got there, and it seems to be working out pretty well. So we move on to our next thing, and that's taking some more Fang Brown and some white, Scar White again, and again we're working outwards. So we're putting her aside to dry, and we actually mix that together so we can get and bring out some depth into that cloak that he's wearing, that bearskin cloak, and some of the fur elements that he has. Just hitting it over there just very, very lightly, so it's just coming out a little bit. And you can see what we're doing here. We're just getting it right on that fur, so it just sits up on the fur and gives that fur effect. And that's all we really want to do. We just want that to sit up there nicely and just work, and there we go. Nice and easy, brushing it on there, not doing it too heavily. Nice light coat, and it kind of works out very, very, very well. And you just hit all those areas. You see, like I just think I don't have enough, and then I just take a little bit of that brown and go over those horns a little bit to just bring those out a little bit. You want to hit some of the edges, so that worked out very, very well, and it sits up top. Next thing I'm doing is I'm just taking some Beastal Brown, and I'm just kind of working the boots and just the top of the horns a little bit. I just want to hit the scale of the horns and just working it in there a little bit, and that gives that a little bit more of a brown effect there, as you can see. And Just throw a little over, just a little bit to give a little different kind of shade, so you just don't have everything all blended together like that. And just gives it a very, very nice effect, especially when you have everything. Now that's Necron compound. What I'm going to do with that, it's a dry brush. It's a dry paint. So you just want to get a little bit on your paintbrush, and it's almost like a rubbery. So you kind of rub your brush on there, and it goes on very dry. And it's perfect because what we're going to do is we're going to see how dark that sword is. Well, it's not going to be dark anymore because we just kind of see how we just work that in there, and then we work it on the inside of the shield a little bit. Now watch what this does for the outside there. You see, just working a little bit on there. It just goes on dry. I mean, it's almost dry the minute it hits the model, but you could see how it really brings that lead belcher and gives it that nice silver effect. And you can see how that all kind of works in there perfectly. And we're just working that over. We can go over a little bit of the belts there, just to get a touch on there, to show some wear. That's all we want to do. We just want to show a little bit of wear, and that's really working out exactly the way we want it to. Very nicely, very, very nicely. And that's all we can ask. Just working over the top, and then over the back of the thing, and then just all over anything that's metallic there. And it really stands out. You see how I'm hitting the higher points of that retribution armor. It really works, and you see how that good glisten and a nice shine to it. So it actually stands out a little bit more, and that's what we're really, really, really looking for. Now we're going to take this shabby bone. Now if you remember, we painted over that breastplate, but now after we put that wash, it really got dark. So what we want to do here is we want to go over, and you see I got a very small brush, and just take our time. Look how close my fingers are on that brush, and how I'm just working that in nice and easy. Nice and easy. Just hitting the high points. I'm not pushing the paint on there. I'm just touching the higher points of that bone area so that stands out a little bit. Because we want that to be separate from the skin, and we want to take that wash off a little bit, but still keep it where it gives some form underneath. And that's exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. And you see how it's standing out right there? That's all we wanted to do. And we're just hitting, now we're hitting the edge of that bone plate that he has on his shoulders from your pictures. And you can see that all I'm doing is just giving my interpretation of this and how I see it in my mind. Now going over the skulls on his legs, and you can see how now all of a sudden they pop out on his legs. Those skulls that he has there, and you can see he's come together pretty nicely. It's exactly what we were looking for. Nothing too fancy, very, very simple. And then we just take just a hair of it and just hit over those horns to give those horns a little bit more definition. And that's what we look for. We want that definition in the horns. We want that standing out perfectly. We just want that coming out enough where it's just going to stand out. And you can see that we're right where exactly we want to do. Now we take some Evil Sun Red. There were just a couple dots that they had on him, on the handle of his sword, and then on that bone plate there was some definition. So we're just going to take a little bit of that Sun Red and just dot it in there. Dot it in there nice and easy. And you can see where that's just coming in there perfectly. And that's all we want to do, is have that sit in there. Perfect. Exactly where we want to do when we hit the edge there. And that's all we're asking it to do. Just sit there and hang there perfectly. And he's looking pretty good. Pretty good for exactly what we wanted to do. And there's the brute. You can see I'm matching him up to the card. and he doesn't look half bad, to be honest. It's just about where we want it to be, and that's pretty close, and that's good enough for what we want to do. Now we're just going to do the bases, and we'll be good with the brute. And now let's take a look at her, and we'll pull her card out, and you can see how she is supposed to look, and we're going to turn that around, and you can see we kind of got what we wanted to. We didn't build the fire. I didn't like it, so we just went with that, and we're pretty happy with it. And that's all there was to it. It was as simple as that. I did it in about an hour. I did both of those guys and just knocked them out. It's just layering, bouncing back and forth, letting things dry, and just letting things all work out the way they want to. And thank you very much for watching this. Hope you enjoyed it.